Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever time zone it is, wherever are you in the world, it is your Lord and Saviour. And did you know that Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines was going to have a very different plot indeed, and it was going to involve some very key characters into the plot of Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines? Well, what did I find? Well, truth be told, I haven't found much at all, to be honest. This was found by somebody else. But first of all, I know there's going to be a few people that are going to point this out, so allow me just to describe the setup a little bit. That blanket there is to stop some of that light coming through from the curtain, because that's already quite bright as is, and without there you'd all be blinded. So it's not a great fix, but it should stop you taking some aggravated willpower damage. And then we've got Doris here, who is a mannequin that belongs to Mama Law by Night. Now, I was going to get rid of her, but some of you actually kind of like the presence of her being there and remarked on some of the unfinished crochet behind me, so she's going to stay there. But I think that she could use with a nice hat, if I do say so myself. But back to the Bloodlines related material. If we come over here to this book, this isn't a hidden book, this isn't a hidden item or anything. This is a book that you can find in Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. It's actually many books that you can find in Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. Whenever you open up a skill book and, you know, increase one of your skills or attributes, this is the book that you would see. It would open up with a nice little animation and it reveals all this text. However, if you look closely at some of these words here, if you just kind of squint a little bit, I'd zoom in, but you can't see it with that. You've got Camarilla. You've got LA. Does that say Bloodlines? Vampire? The Quasian? What's all this then? Well, this, my friends, on one of these pages, well, both of them actually, it's the same bit of text on the same side. You can see that, and the Quasian is there, and the Quasian is there. This contains the original pitch, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. And as I said, this was not discovered by me. This was discovered by a friend of the channel, Ian Watson. Or, to use their credits in the unofficial patch of Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, Ian W. Genius name in there. But Ian knows quite a lot about Bloodlines, shall we say, given the fact that they've worked on the unofficial patch. And they also would go on and develop the X20 mod, which puts like some very lore-specific things in there and Easter eggs. Like there's a lot of Pentex-related stuff in there, for example. But Ian has been poking around with Bloodlines for many, many years now. They know a lot about the world of Darkness and Vampire. I'll leave their socials in the description below because there's a lot of cool stuff that they post about, and they're just a generally nice person. But Ian was sort of chatting away with me the other day regarding like the original pitch regarding Bloodline, because I had no idea that such a thing existed. I was actually talking to a separate friend about Bloodline for reasons I can't tell you for just yet, and it led on to this original pitch. And then Ian has sent this screenshot over, and this next one, which is like the main texture of the book, you know, without it all folded up, this would be like plastered onto the book. So if I just zoom in a little bit more, you can see that welcome to the world of Vampire Bloodlines. You've got some other bits up here. There's one word that Ian was unable to decipher, and I want to say it's this word here. You've got teeth there. I'm assuming that says vampire, and I'll get onto that in just a moment. We'll have a good read of it at the moment, but Ian was sort of poking around with, you know, the different textures and whatnot, and then discovered that and realised, hold on, this isn't the Latin spiel that you usually get. That's my words, not theirs. And they went ahead and decided to decipher all of that, which I think is really fucking cool. But what does it actually say, and is this available for you to go and have a look at yourself? Yes, it is. If you download the unofficial patch, there's like a box or something that you tick to see if you want any additional bits and pieces. It's usually in the form of like deleted content that's been inserted back in. But one of the things that's been added are these transcripts. And these transcripts contain some of the text that's included in the game, mostly in the form of the Malkavian whispers, some quest-related things, the radio show loops. You also have like the loading screen tips that appear as you're transitioning from one scene to the next, but you also have this story pitch. Now, this being a standard text file, it's the sort where it's not broken up in like a document format. It just goes on until the end of time. So reading it here would be a bit awkward indeed, but because I'm a nice bastard, I've just copied and pasted this all over into a Google Doc, which we can go and look at right now. So the text reads as follows. Every game of chess begins with one move. Your story begins on a rain-soaked evening in the pay-by-the-hour motel just off the Sunset Strip. You are the bastard property of an Anarch lick, side against the traditions of the Kindred. And it's interesting from the get-go that we know of the sect that the Kindred who embraced you belonged of. I mean, it makes sense given that LA is like Anarch domain, but it's in a point of its history where the Camarilla trying to get itself back in, so it could be just a Camarilla vampire, to be honest, but for it to specifically say it's an Anarch lick is rather interesting. And if anybody's like coming into this 5th edition's like, okay, why would the prince have anything involved to do with this anyway? Well, first of all, the Camarilla bastards, and they will take what they can, and they declare it as theirs because it's like a rite of passage sort of thing. And at this point in vampire history, in its lore and its metaplot, the Anarch Free States were considered sort of independent. The Anarchs were technically a faction within the Camarilla at this point, and you're going to have to excuse my snoring dog Holly there. She will pick up in volume, I'm sure. Your fate was sealed before, question mark, which is that word that Ian was unable to transcribe. I think it says vampire because the next word is teeth, ever punctured your neck. I'm not too sure what else that would be, but whatever. An outcast to both kind and kindred, you wander the streets until you're hunted down and brought before the newly appointed Camarilla prince. Again, there's a slight change of the story here. We can probably presume here that maybe the opening cinematic would have been a little bit different. That you would have been out and about wandering around, or maybe that could have been your tutorial. That maybe that this Anarch lick is like showing you the ropes or whatever. So rather than have Smiling Jack showed you everything, you would have had this vampire to show you everything. Which would have been a pretty interesting thing indeed, but of course we get the more sleazy, dirty equivalent, which I think sets a really beautiful vibe all the same. The prince, holding only the most tenuous of authority in an Anarch city like Los Angeles, is forced to hand down harsh judgment. Your sire is killed immediately. You're given a difficult ordeal to prove your worth. In chess, small moves start the game, but they're always the most important. Now, the inclusion of chess here is a very interesting thing indeed, because chess plays a significant role within Bloodlines, because you get those emails sent to you where whoever's talking to you, like moving the pieces about, as it were, talks about in chess quite a lot. We talk about the jihad and the internal struggle in vampires, like this great chess game where the elders and Methuselahs are moving everybody out as part of their own political fuckery. And also if you have a look at the symbols of the generation titles of Methuselah, Elder, Neonate and Ancillor, I've got the order slightly wrong here, but the chess pieces are different there. The Neonates are pawns and so on and so forth, because they have more importance and dominance over the chessboard. So to include that here in its original pitch, I think is a really cool thing indeed. Just a little nod that they are very much aware, the writers of Troika Games editors were very much aware of how vampire works, and they were obviously prepared to include those themes and ideas in there. So perhaps that was going to play a much more important role in the original Bloodlines as well, because you get little snippets here and then, there's emails like I said, but perhaps maybe that somebody will come along and like puppeteer things even further, and you would meet like a mysterious character who like make players wonder what's their grander role in this. Of course, this is all just hypothesizing on the first paragraph and line. From there, it's a stark, sinister ride through the shadowed warrens of Los Angeles, from the smoky neon-cast rooms of the underground club scene to hidden vampire fortresses in the Hollywood Hills. Along the way, a mystery begins to take shape, involving the most powerful of canine society and other supernatural creatures. Notice a plural, because we got werewolves and we got wraiths in the Bloodlines that we got, so would there have been more? You don't know who to trust. Perhaps it's an all-elaborate hoax created by the Malkavians, or a trap set by the Society of Leopold, and it seems that someone or something is helping you, pushing you in certain directions, or perhaps it is everything else that is being pushed around you. So again, it's talking about that whole jihad thing that I just waffled on about ages. And sure, it may have been an example just to list a Malkavian prank or the Society of Leopold, but we do have some Malkavian inclusion in Bloodlines with Grout and the Society of Leopold all connected with that as well. Were they going to work in a similar way, or maybe both of those were going to have a much larger role? Again, we don't know, but it's just interesting to think about, like how there's some similar things here, but this pitch here presents things in a very different light, or at least in my mind it does at least. Chess masters can see many moves in advance. Some can play the whole game before it even begins. Welcome to the world of Vampire Bloodlines, and I've italicized this just to make it clear that this is a separate heading in the transcript rather than something that exists as part of the transcript, if that makes sense. A Camarilla prince has moved into LA, much like the Bloodlines that we got, looking for a way to establish his authority. Having secretly negotiated an agreement, the Graysian have begun to perpetuate the myth that Jeremy McNeil was not actually killed in the Battle of Signal Hill, and that he has returned to Los Angeles. Now, the focus on Jeremy McNeil here puts a very different spin on the LA that we got, because he's not mentioned in the Bloodlines that we got. It's kind of alluded to with something that Nines can say if you go through the Anarch route, where it talks about like his predecessor fell to the Quasian when Nines is talking about how much he hates the Quasian in the Anarch ending, like how his predecessor fell before him. Now this has been interpreted in one or two ways, like literally the last person to rule the Anarch Free States, because that's what Nines is here, but some have also interpreted this as him being his sire, which I think is a very interesting spin on it. But having Jeremy McNeil here not dead, or at least alluded to be dead, as much as the plot as Vampire the Masquerade Revised Edition would insist, it's just interesting the inclusion of such a key important figure to the history and the lore of Vampire here. Like, that could have been very exciting. At the same time, the Quasian have begun to commit vampiric crimes in the city and are making it look as if McNeil is doing them, which is similar to what happened in Bloodlines. You have Ming Zhao, who takes on the form of Nines and appears to have assassinated Grout, when really it was a Quasian fuckery. So it's interesting, there are the similarities there, but having Jeremy McNeil here puts things in a very different light, that this very, I want to say proud leader, but the thing with Jeremy McNeil is that he doesn't want to rule, but being a vampire, he doesn't really want to step down and give that leadership to somebody else. Like, it's a very interesting part of his character, and it would have put him in a very interesting light, and maybe with whatever investigation that you could have done as a character, could have tried and decipher whether you think he is guilty or not, and who you aligned with as well. All of this is to undermine the Anarchs' belief in their fallen leader, and to have them turn to the Prince for their new leadership. The Quasian, unbeknownst to the Prince, hope to use this situation to establish their own power in LA, wiping out both the Anarchs and the Camarilla, which is what happens in Bloodlines. If you signed with Ming Zhao, you find out that that's what happens. Like, Ming Zhao gets you to deal with LaCroix, so they can like step in and you do all the work for them. You're now the greatest threat, and they kill you. The PC, newly illicitly embraced, is shown mercy by the Prince and is allowed to prove himself through an ordeal. After completing this, he begins to work with Anastas de Zagreb, whose name I've probably butchered, a Tremere Justicar sent by the Camarilla to investigate a report of Diablerie. Now, both the Tremere and Justicars are very interesting here. Also, just want to highlight, Anastas is an actual character within the meta plot of Vampire the Masquerade. He was replaced by somebody else whose name I cannot remember for the likes of me, so his name is going to appear on the screen now. It's interesting that the Justicar were going to be involved with this sort of investigation, as it were. And if you don't know what the Justicar is, in the Camarilla hierarchy you have the Prince at the top, then the Sheriff, the Primogen, and then so on and so forth. And it's the Prince that controls the sitting domain. Their word is law. Unless you get the Justicars and their Archons involved. The Archons are sort of like a secret police that work for the Justicar, who is like the sword of the inner circle, who are like the original founders of the Camarilla, and they're sitting right at the top, and they choose the Camarilla direction. And if they overlook a city and a domain and realise that this prince is not doing a fucking good job, or this is in such a bad state, we need like our best to go and sort things out, they send in a Justicar. And it's interesting that we're using the Tremere here, and it's kind of like Strauss replaced the role of Zagreb in this. And I think having the Justicar would have been a bit confusing for the newbie vampire player, because you've got like two roles that control and who can make decisions and like throw down the law, as it were. I mean, it would have been interesting to have like a prince all the way through this who have a certain way. If you had somebody like the Croix, the snotty brat that he was, like throwing like, it's my word, the law, whatever, so forth, and maybe in a certain ending this Justicar arrives and you find out that he can overthrow anything that Croix's doing, even getting rid of him. That would have been really cool, but I can understand having like these two authority figures like neck and neck like that could have been a bit confusing. Strangely, the Ankaran sarcophagus, a newly discovered ancient relic from Turkey, has disappeared into thin air. Now again, the Ankaran sarcophagus is obviously a very important thing. I've butchered that pronunciation and I don't care, but it's interesting it's listed from coming from Turkey here rather than presumably Egypt, which is what everybody seems to think it came from. And I wonder why that location changed. It's a small little thing, but you wonder if they were going to be having certain vampiric implications there. The prince, worried about the violations of the Masquerade, as well as the possible importance of the sarcophagus to the thieves, who he assumes are kindred, has the PC investigate the matter. So it seems like this game was going to be more of like an investigation rather than you just being moved about, seeing all the different sides from their personal angles and then choosing who you want to go to at the end, with a bit of action and social stuff all the way through. This would felt like more of an investigation with some RP involved, and perhaps, and being an investigation, there would have been a lot more of a focus on socializing and the actual strong elements that Vampire's known for, rather than a rushed, botched combat that we got at the end. Take note, the Chinese room. The story begins to unfold. Half of the time the PC is working for the Justicar, who knows of nothing to the prince's machinations, but is beginning to suspect, gathering the evidence against McNeil, and the other half of the time he is looking into the Ankaran sarcophagus. It is while the PC is investigating the sarcophagus that he eventually finds the clues that lead him to discover the connections between the prince and the Kuei Jin, and allows for the final conflict and resolution of the story. The assumption presented in more detail in the following section is that a very powerful vampire introduced the Ankaran sarcophagus to the situation in LA. Seeing the possible implications of a power shift to the Kuei Jin, he masterminds plots to expose the connection between the prince and the Kuei Jin and neutralise them both. Now this vampire could have been that one that's pushing you in the right directions, a much powerful elder or Methuselah. It'd be interesting to see that we can assume that, similar to what we got in Bloodlines, you could choose a different ending. Like, do you side with the Camarilla, in this case the Justicar, or do you side with the Croy? Do you side with the Anarchs and Jeremy McNeil? Or do you side with the Kuei Jin and get completely fucked over in the end? Or maybe there'd be like other ways of like siding with McNeil. Maybe you just side him and he just wants to get the fuck out, sort of thing. Again, we don't know, because this was an original pitch, and obviously a lot of this carried over into the Bloodlines that we got. But it seems that how things are written and presented, that there would have been a slight shift in the focus or whatever. It seems like you would have had a lot more involvement with all of this, rather than just like doing somebody's shopping list, as it were. Because as cool as engaging most of the quests are in Bloodlines, you are being pushed around as a fledgling sort of thing, and you do feel that, and it's very on key for the themes of Vampire. But you would have assumably had like more of an impact on the story, rather than just being like the messenger, the delivery boy, you know, the errand boy sort of thing. But seeing this version of Bloodlines would have been pretty neat, which of course I'm very happy with the Bloodlines that we got, you know, warts and all. But knowing that this exists, and it's in the game files no less, and it was like sitting there for like many years, and Ian fairly recently, like a few years ago, discovered this. My hat's off to you, you know, when it's, you know what I mean. But yeah, that's just so cool, and it just makes you wonder, really, like, how many more things like that are hiding within the game's files, or a little detail here and there that we just haven't noticed before. Like, it's just, doesn't that just get you really excited just to think what we could have, or could have had, or like, not in a bad way sort of thing, but like, what other tidbits are in there, like, oh, I wish I was on a fly on the wall sort of thing. Like, why did they choose these specific characters and whatnot, and like what made them change? And maybe with Jeremy McNeil, like choosing that from Nines is something to consider as well. Maybe the writers didn't want them to kill off Jeremy McNeil, or maybe they deliberately wanted to keep his end vague, as it was, because he's never fucking mentioned again. Like, it's cool to think about, and I just love wandering and pondering on this sort of stuff. But what do you lot think about it? Let me know in the comments below, the good, bad, and the debatably ugly. Like, would you have liked to have played a Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines like this, or any other vampire game like this, really? Like, is this something that you're aware about already? And, like, just tell me all your thoughts and opinions about it. That would be pretty cool. And whilst you're heading down there, check out the various links in the description below, where you'll find various Vampire the Masquerade books to include in your TTRPG games, because if you may not know, Bloodlines is based around the TTRPG Vampire the Masquerade, and it'll be awesome to have more people embraced into the lore tree and the general World of Darkness communities. And if you purchase those books using those specific links, I get some of the money back, because I'm an affiliate on the Storyteller's Vault, where I can provide interesting lore dives of the vampire clans, some character creation guides in case you're a bit stuck, book reviews, game reviews. I did one for Bloodlines many years ago, and presumably Bloodlines 2 when that comes out. And I doubt I'm going to be given a review code for that, so any financial support that could work towards any of those themes would be greatly appreciated. But I can understand if you can't do that, that's absolutely fine. You know, times are hard and all of that. but you can just like, share, subscribe with any and all that would appreciate and love what I do, and I will see you on the next upload, whatever that may well be for you. And until next time, farewell. And Holly too, apparently.